Chapter 72. Gaze forward. No matter how many times they do this, it still feels real. The sound of overlapping commands, the cries of Pokémon attacking and being attacked, the explosive noise of Pokeballs opening to send out new combatants. It all blends together to send a thrill through Blue's body, quickening his pulse despite the cool lens of his battle calm that helps him observe the ebb and flow of the battle. It doesn't have the life or death edge to it that actual incidents in the wild would. But Blue still feels every loss on his team keenly, still feels compelled to win at all costs. Which, as part of the attacking team, means striking at the Pokedolls their opponents are clustered around. The 6 defenders are doing a good job of not just keeping their ring secure, so no stray attacks go through, but defeating the attackers efficiently, swapping places with quick, coordinated movements to ensure that each trainer is using the best counter available to one the attacking trainers are using no matter where in the circle they are. Case in point, as soon as Blue's opponent sees his Wartortle come out, he quickly shuffles 2 spaces to the right and sends his Sandslash to help a teammate, as his own position is taken by another trainer with a Lombre. Blue smothers a curse and orders an Ice Beam, knowing that the Grass-Water type would be able to take more of them than Maturin would its retaliating grass attacks. If this were a normal match, it would be easy to just swap himself, either to a different one of his own Pokémon or with one of his teammates. But it's far from that. The battle is meant to mimic the attrition actual defenders face in Tier 2 or 3 incidents, while still maintaining even teams so neither is overwhelmed. And Glenn's solution was to give his own team only 3 Pokémon each to the attackers' full 6. To balance that, Blue suggested attackers not be able to coordinate with each other or swap their Pokémon unless they were about to faint, just as if they were real wild Pokémon on a rampage. With one exception. Glenn agreed to the exception without knowing what it was, and just before the match, Blue told his team to bring at least 1 flying or ground Pokémon, then save them for last. As Maturin desperately tries to avoid the green glow of the Lombre's absorb, Blue raises her ball with one hand and his whistle to his lips with the other before blowing a single long, sharp, unwavering note. Both defenders and attackers pause for a heartbeat, and then 6 red beams connect with 6 Pokémon. Blue reclips Maturin and grabs another ball, movements matching his teammates so that all 6 new Pokémon appear almost simultaneously. The defensive team has only a moment to recognize that they're now facing a mix of exclusively flying and ground Pokémon, and then Glenn is yelling out his own counter order to coordinate their response. Blue can't hear it over his next whistled command to Zephyr, but the defensive Pokémon are quickly swapped out for water and ice types. The attackers are already acting, however, and their Pokémon start kicking up dirt, multiple sand attacks creating a haze that the defenders struggle to aim through. Beams of frost-forming light pierce the localized sandstorm until one nails a Fearow, which is withdrawn before it hits the ground and replaced with a Diglett that immediately begins adding to the mass sand attack. It helps that all the types strong against either flying or ground attacks are weak to ground or flying ones respectively, and that the only type that can hit back against both hard, ice, is fairly rare. Their opponents only have 2, though most water Pokémon are taught at least 1 as well. Blue wipes sweat from above one eye, gaze jumping constantly to spot any early sign of change in the defender's strategy. This is the critical moment of the battle, and they would either win or lose by how well the defenders can deal with the sudden shift. It takes nearly 20 seconds before a wave of water suddenly gushes out to the side of the cloud, instantly clearing all the sand and dirt coming in from a third of the circle of attackers. Twin beams of light spear out and hit a Sandshrew and Pidgeotto, and the lack of renewed sand and dirt coming from those directions gives the defenders an opening. Blue has to suppress the urge to shout out a command to the others, judging this to be outside the limits of the allowed offensive coordination. 3 of his trainers still move on their own to try and cover the breach, but not the ones on the far side who can't see it, and what looks like the full might of the defenders start pushing through the opening to quickly overwhelm them. Blue doesn't go to try and fight them. The only chance the offense has now is that the defense will leave one side exposed, and they can swoop in for a quick hit on one of the Pokedolls. He blows another command to Zephyr instead, and his Pidgeotto follows him around to the other side, away from the defenders that have breached the sandstorm. The 2 remaining attackers on the backside have realized something is wrong when Blue and Zephyr join them, but there's no time for them to figure out what. One more sharp whistle followed by 2 brief notes, and Zephyr sends a whirlwind over the field strong enough to clear all the remaining sand. only to reveal Glenn's Snorlax, his trainer standing by Blue's goal, ready to defend it. His hair and skin are covered in sand and dirt, but he quickly wipes his face mask clean, and Blue can see his smile as he sees what's waiting for him. Blue grins back, then attacks with his teammates in one last desperate bid to overwhelm the Snorlax before Glenn's allies come. As soon as the battle ends, Blue's calm leaves him. He feels it trickling away, wishing it would stay just a little while longer, at least until he finishes dealing with the media. Even as unofficial training exercises, the group battles would probably have gathered some interest on their own. Outside the Rangers' practice incidents, it's rare for so many trainers to battle together at once, and the spectacle of it would probably have drawn crowds no matter what, even this far outside the city. But thanks to both Blue's own fame and the widely broadcast genesis of the new format, by their third practice battle, the media had been ready and waiting at the end, and by the fifth, they were there at the start, recording everything. On the one hand, there's an obvious benefit to having so much added screen time and prestige surrounding his pet project. What he's doing could revolutionize the way gyms operate the world over, and it's good not just to have the matches recorded for posterity, but also to normalize the idea as early as possible. The more time he spends answering questions and talking about his vision, the better. And the interviewers seem happy to let him go on until his throat gets sore. On the other hand, each post-battle interview takes time away from him and his trainers. Even during their smaller private battles, Blue enjoyed spending time after each match he participated in or observed going over what happened, doling out feedback both teasing and serious, reviewing strategies and tactics from every angle. It helped improve bonds between the trainers and gave him a wider understanding of how other trainers think about battles. The first few group battles ended the same way, the trainers unwinding together as they talked and teased and laughed about the match, all while establishing strong feedback norms both within and between the battling teams. Blue started the very first battle debrief with Aiko's ritual, and it became a staple of each. No less bittersweet no matter how many times he went through it. Having that all recorded is probably good too, but it also feels like an intrusion, and tonight is worse than ever. The two teams are practically mobbed as soon as the last Pokémon is withdrawn, and Blue has to jog over to intercept the reporters as they hesitate at the circular dip in the ground where all the dirt was kicked up. Once their attention is drawn to him, they start fanning out and focusing their cameras and extending microphones. How did that battle go, Blue? Are you disappointed your side lost? What inspired this battle's setup? It's times like this Blue misses Leaf most. He raises his hands to quiet them, trying to think of how he can diplomatically ask them to back off. If he just asks them for privacy, it would just make some of them that much more curious as to what they talk about. And then his watch chimes with an incoming message. He taps its screen to read it, and his pulse, which had just finished slowing from the end of the match, kicks back into high gear as hope surges through him. He turns to the media with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry. I know you've come all this way in the hopes of another interview, but I've just been summoned by Leader Surge. If you're willing to wait, you can meet me outside the gym in a couple hours, and I'll likely have more to talk about than I do now." What's the meeting about, Blue? Was this scheduled, or did you just get the invitation? He holds both hands up again to quiet them. It was just sent, and I imagine it has something to do with the footage you all have been broadcasting. Maybe he wants to criticize my performance in person, so thanks for that. He's smiling as he says it, and the crowd chuckles. I don't know for sure what we'll talk about, of course, but I hope it has some relevance to these exercises, and I'm happy to discuss it more later. The news folk seem reluctantly satisfied with that, and once Blue turns away from the few remaining shouted questions, he feels relief when even those quickly stop, and everyone mobilizes to change venue. Nice to have some privacy, Glenn murmurs as Blue returns to the trainers. They're really a meeting with Surge? Yep, Blue says as the others gather around and smiles, but it's not for an hour. The group laughs, and Blue turns to them. 12 trainers in total, 7 boys and 5 girls, badges ranging from 4 at the top end to 0 at the lowest, ages 12 to 16. Not the best he's trained or fought with, but the best that would make this commitment with him, that would trust him. And all of them faced Zapdos's attack. Blue's spent over a month training intensely with them all, while simultaneously working to develop these mock incident battles. And if Surge's invitation is really about adopting the scenarios officially, maybe it'll finally have paid off. That said, we'll still have to cut this short for me to get there on time, so let's go straight into it, Blue says to the expectant ring of faces. It makes him sad to skip the ritual, and for a moment the old bitterness at being dark flares up before he pushes it away again by reminding himself of the advantages. Good job to the defense. The improvised surf wave was inspired, and I think it would work just as well against wild Pokemon. Whose idea was it? Glenn, along with the rest of his team, look at Lizzie and Kron, who glance at each other then raise their hands with sheepishly proud smiles. Blue smiles back and nods at them. Next match, the two of you are going to be on opposite teams. Who wants to swap with one of them? I will, Elaine says, brushing some hair out of her face and tying it back with the rest of her bun. The auburn curls have gotten long enough to reach her shoulders now, and no matter how tight she ties it, some strands keep managing to escape. Why? Blue asks, curious rather than challenging. We'll be status heavy if he comes, and have too many sweepers if she does. Those are my specialties. She smiles slightly. Plus, it would be nice to win a match once in a while. There are a round of oohs mixed with scattered laughter, Blue's among it. It's true that his team has been losing lately, mostly because he suspects Glenn is just a better strategist than him. The gap is closing, though, and Blue nods. Good luck with that. If we win the next one, we'll know who the dead weight was. The group's reaction is even stronger this time, and Elaine grins wide as she flicks her hair back and puts a hand on her hip. It's a poor trainer that blames their mon instead of themselves. Blue winces as everyone laughs again at his own words thrown back at him. A response comes to mind, but he'd rather end things on a self-deprecating note, and it's good to see Elaine engage in banter like this. The storm changed all of them in some way, but Elaine more than others. Aiko's death seemed to take something out of the girl's bright-eyed enthusiasm, replaced it with a quieter self-confidence that led, among other things, to her being willing to speak against her friends far more often. There's still some of the old Elaine left, however, particularly when it's just her, Glenn, and Blue. He still remembers the kiss she gave him before they split up, rain falling around them and buildings burning above. The memory makes him uncomfortable, and thankfully, she hasn't brought it up or done anything like it since. On your own head be it, he says with mock severity, then turns to the group again. So what did we learn from that match? Flying and ground combo is bullshit, someone mutters to another round of laughter. You guys countered it well enough, Taro says, and others on Blue's team nod. Oh, I also learned to keep moving when sight is limited. Dangerous in a real fight, his sister disagrees. Might get hit without Pokemon between you and the enemy. Not to be done lightly then, Blue says, as he turns the topic over in his thoughts. Should we be practicing a move like that in training, if it's too dangerous to use outside of it? The group is silent a moment before another of Blue's team speaks up. The team that's imitating wild Pokemon should. MG is a year older than Blue, but her clothes make her look younger. Long sleeves that nearly cover her hands, a wide black hat that covers her hair, and generally enough layers of dark cloth to make her seem like she's wearing an outfit that's too big for her. At first, he thought she might have a skin condition that makes her avoid sunlight, and he still hasn't ruled it out. But when he asked her about it, she insisted that she just likes layers. Though it might not be that easy, Nyx and Vortumna would probably try to stay with me if I tried to go in another direction from them. You might want to train that out of them, Blue says, thinking of the way her Murkrow and Eevee can fight so well as a team. If you ever need them to stay in one place while you do something elsewhere. She shakes her head. I can use other Pokemon for that. I'd rather their default be to stay with me. Blue nods, letting the topic go. When she first started showing up to practice battles, he thought she was too shy to be part of the core group he was forming, even worse than Elaine used to be for speaking up for herself. But while she is shy most of the time, she often switches to confident and assertive when it comes to discussing her Pokemon or battling, and she's definitely smart enough to deserve her spot. All of his trainers are. He's proud of both teams, and while a steady, stubborn, stupid part of him misses what used to be, he's had time to grieve, and move on. These days he keeps his gaze steady on the present and future. True, and most scenarios are a bit defense-favored anyway, Glenn adds to something Blue missed while wool gathering. Including this one? Blue asks with a smile, which starts an argument about whether it's true or not. The discussion stays largely positive, given Glenn was leading the defense when he made the comment, and after a minute, Blue decides to leave them to it, and summons his bike after a round of goodbyes. He's already wearing his pads. It's part of his standard trainer gear now, ever since he had to throw himself to the side to avoid a boulder that flew past his Pokémon. When Blue arrives at the gym, the media is already set up outside. He's surprised to see the crowd has grown. Most reporters wouldn't let their rivals in on a new story like this. When he gets close enough to make out specifics, however, the reason is obvious, and he feels foolish for thinking the world revolves around him. Leader Surge is a head taller than the tallest reporter, and imposingly built, with shoulders so broad that Blue often feels like he should have trouble going through doors. His strong, commanding voice is distinct even when speaking at a normal pitch, and as Blue approaches the secondary crowd of civilians gathered around the reporters, he can finally make out some of what's going on. Very closely with the mayor to integrate new plans into reconstruction. Pewter, Celadon, Saffron, and Fuchsia have already reached out to adopt some of the defensive measures into their city design, but there's a lot more we could do if we really pushed for it. Are you talking about walls? A reporter asks as Blue stops at the edge of the crowd to listen. No. The mayor and I agree that any form of restriction on movement could be as much a liability as a benefit, especially in the event that a full evacuation is necessary. But what I hope to see in Vermilion are automated shutters for every window and door that can be deployed citywide within minutes, smaller bunkers built into basements beneath every residence, and those buildings most affected, he says as he points to the burnt husks being torn down in the distance, will be rebuilt with state-of-the-art fireproofing. The mayor and I both share a lifelong commitment to a common purpose, to make Vermilion City the safest in the world. The crowd around the reporters break into applause and cheers, and Blue claps along with them as the media starts shouting more questions that Surge gives some unheard response to before he turns to the gate. Blue starts squeezing through the crowd to follow him, waving at the few reporters that spot him, and switch to shouting questions at him instead, until he's through the gym entrance and jogging up behind his leader. The tall blonde turns and smiles as he sees Blue approach. You're a bit early. Did you hear about the press release? No, sir, came straight from group debrief. Good man. Head to my office. I'll be there in a few minutes. Blue nods and breaks off toward the elevator. Vermilion Gym's non-training rooms are as utilitarian as it comes, and the first time he was summoned to it, he expected Surge's office to be no different. Instead, he found himself in a room that looks less like a simple meeting and administrative space, and more like a Ranger HQ coordination room. There's a desk in the corner with a computer and some filing cabinets, but most of the floor space is dominated by a round hollow table ringed with chairs. When he enters it now, he finds the gym's second and third present, and watching a static holograph of the city, its buildings and streets highlighted in various colors. Hello, Blue, Sabra says in her customary low drawl as she manipulates the hologram to rotate it. Haven't seen you in a while. You're not avoiding me to get out of training assignments, are you? Blue straightens his shoulders and bows his head and neck. I'm sorry, Second. Of course not. I've just been busy with... I know. Hard to miss when it's all over the news. She jerks her head to a monitor on the wall, which shows some reporter still talking outside the gym. Her lips quirk as her half-lidded eyes turn to his. I'm partially teasing you, but also reminding you that your gym duties don't end because of special assignments. Message me your availability for the week by tomorrow morning. Blue bows again, this time including his upper torso. Yes, ma'am. Blue interacted with Sabra a handful of times outside of classes, back when she was the third. After the storm, she stopped teaching as many once the new third, Igarim, took over for most of her duties. Blue hasn't spent quite all of his time with his own group since joining the gym, and has gotten to know other members fairly well over the past 2 months, but Sabra is an exception who feels more a stranger now than less. Igarim is a near-total mystery. He fought her during his challenge matches, but she didn't speak beyond what was necessary, and like Sabra, he hasn't interacted with her since joining up. He remembers hearing that she's not a particularly strong trainer, but more focused on other things. She was apparently studying city planning and infrastructure before either Serge convinced her to join his gym, or she became motivated to study Pokemon battles. That knowledge keeps Blue from being surprised when she suddenly turns to him. Maybe he'll see it. Igaram taps the edge of the table with her knuckles. We're considering where a new hospital should go to replace the one destroyed in the attack. Any suggestions? Blue steps forward slowly, eyes on the holographic model, and after just a moment he recognizes the area they're focused on. He's not likely to forget the part of the city where Aiko died. What's wrong with the original location? He asks, and is pleased to hear that his voice sounds casual despite the sudden dryness in his throat, the tightness in his chest. Out of the corner of his eye, he sees Sabra watching him, but he dismisses the thoughts associated with that and just focuses on Igaram. That should be part of your answer, she says, rotating the map and zooming into the hospital campus. Unless that is your answer. No, Blue says, and swallows. Zoom back out? She does so, and Blue tries to focus past the upsurge of confusion and pain, frustration and anger, grief and betrayal. The hospitals are highlighted a certain color, and he can see a spot that's more central between the other hospitals, around the one that had collapsed, with Aiko inside it, and read out. There, maybe? Blue points, almost feeling like he's just reacting at random rather than spend more time thinking about it. But no, it's the clear spot that's closest to the middle of all the hospitals around it. Igaram tisks and turns the holo back in another direction. With all these open streets to the east and north, no thank you. We want to avoid it being overrun. Let them build a shopping mall there or something. Sabra snorts, and Blue focuses a bit more now that he knows what the criteria they're looking for are. He reconsiders the hospital plaza and realizes the issue. The foundation is probably not as sound as it used to be. You want a place between these hospitals where the ground is still secure, the sightlines are good without being open to rampage, and that means... here? He points. Igaram smiles and zooms the map back out. See? He sees it. Sabra shakes her head. Wasn't disagreeing with you, Ig. It's politics, that's all. They'll never let it be built there. People don't want a hospital nearby? Blue asks, confused enough that the other feelings aren't as distracting. Why? Not the people living there, the people living elsewhere. New hospital means new need for stores, offices, apartments. Huge boost to the local land value. Incidents like this are always an opportunity for some to make more money, and Serge is trying to get the mayor to cut into all the dickering, but with an election coming, she's interrupted by the door opening to reveal Leader Serge, and... Blue searches his memory for where he knows the face of the second man from, then finds it by imagining him as a talking head. Hiro Iha is one of the top Indigo League administrators, most recently famous for pushing back against the idea of limiting Pokemon attacks in league matches, particularly those without spectators. Hope rises in Blue. If they're here to talk about the gym's official adoption of scenario battles, having a league official that seems generally in favor of realism seems promising. And then a second one walks in, and Blue recognizes her immediately. Yuna Khatri's first act after joining the regulatory body was to do a full inspection of each gym's trainer strength evaluation systems, which led to her pushing for more transparency and equality between gyms in both Kanto and Johto. She got the regional spotlight again last year when she officially censured Leader Giovanni for how much time he spends away from his gym. It's harder to predict what her reaction to his proposal of group challenge matches would have been, but she strikes him as someone interested in conformity between the gyms. He suddenly wishes he had more time to prepare for this, or at least thought of league judgment as a possibility so he could prepare for it. In retrospect, he just assumed that if Serge wanted it to happen, it would. Sabra turns the holo off as Leader Serge moves to the head of the table. Thank you for coming, everyone. This is Mr. Iha and Mrs. Khatri from the League Council, and they'll be joining our discussion. It's a pleasure to meet you both, Blue says, smiling and bowing to the League officials before he sits. I followed your actions on the council with great interest. Oh? Mr. Iha asks after inclining his head back as he pulls out his own chair and lowers himself onto it. What in particular? Blue expected some skepticism and is glad to have at least one specific thing to cite. Most recently, the arguments you made for retaining severe poisons in not just elite matches, but also gym battles, showed a level of trust in trainer discretion that I appreciate. I would love to talk to you more about it later. Mr. Iha raises a brow, but nods with a slight smile. Perhaps we can, another night. We have other obligations after this one. That would be great. Blue turns to mention something of Mrs. Khattri's too, but Serge starts speaking, and he sits. We're here to talk about your scenarios, and whether they're a justified method of delivering badges. Mr. Iha and Mrs. Khattri are here to advise me on the decision. Advising you, sir? Sabra asks, irreverence so subtle that Blue almost misses the emphasis on the second word. Blue can understand the sentiment, even if her attitude, in front of non-gym members no less, is as surprising as ever. The only leader that Blue can think of who might care less what others think of how he runs his gym is Giovanni, and maybe Blaine, but he doesn't really count. Serge gives her a look. My decision will be made based on what I believe is best for our city and gym, and the trainers who come to us, as always. But I still value their wider perspective and any insights and recommendations they may have, and thus ask you all to do your best to answer their questions. Now, given our guest's time constraints, I think we should cut to the chase and... Sorry to interrupt, sir, Blue says, but I'd like to note that Glenn should be here too. He's been working as hard as I have on these scenarios, and he deserves recognition for it as well. Serge's brow furrows, but he nods. Consider it noted. I would ask for him to join us, but... He turns to Mr. Iha, who is checking his watch with a mild frown. He has an Abra set for the gym, Blue presses. It wouldn't take more than maybe 5 minutes for him to arrive. Are you requesting his presence for his sake? Mrs. Khattri asks, gaze meeting Blue's. Or does he have knowledge you lack? Blue feels his neck flush and struggles to keep his expression passive and pleasant as he tries to think of a way to avoid sounding ignorant while still getting Glenn here. I can answer any questions you might have, but Glenn suggested many of the ideas and was part of the planning. I thought having him here to explain his own thoughts, or his side of any disagreements, might give the fullest picture. Mr. Iha is the one that responds with a shake of his head. Such information sounds more relevant to how the gym may decide to adopt and implement these scenarios, and not our interests at this time. We shall make do with what we have. Will it satisfy you if he's invited to future meetings on this topic, and I commend him when I next see him? Serge asks Blue. Future meetings is rather encouraging, though Blue would have preferred the extra support of having Glenn in the room. Still, he can accept the bone Serge is throwing him. Yes, sir. Good. On to the scenarios themselves, then. Serge leans back in his chair and opens a palm to the league officials. Mr. Iha is the first to speak. We all watched the battle that the media broadcast tonight, but some elements to the scenario, or previous ones, are not made clear by observation. What were the rules and balance priorities? Blue settles back in his own chair and runs over his thoughts once again. This part he's long been prepared for. I think some context is necessary. Our first step when we started this over a month ago was to form teams by average experience and skill, followed by consideration of their available Pokemon, since Pokemon are the most variable. If we need to tweak a team into better balance, making them use some of their weaker or stronger Pokemon is an easy way to adjust things. Before even working on any scenarios, we spent a few days doing practice battles, first in 2s, then 3s, then 4s, and so on, to ensure we had a good understanding of each trainer's capabilities and their synergy in working together. Can you explain what you mean by synergy? Igaram asks. Blue hadn't expected a question from anyone besides the league officials, let alone her, but neither seems to object to it. Sure, most trainers, no matter how good, have certain things they're particularly skilled at. Blue thinks of Elaine's comparison to game characters, but decides not to bring up that frame. For some, it's their battle command system. For others, it's their moment-to-moment tactics and reaction time. For others, it's their overall strategy, or their ability to adapt to the unpredictable, or how well-trained their Pokemon are, or a dozen other things. Get someone with good tactics and another with good strategy together, and they can pull off some great things. Two trainers who are really unpredictable could get in each other's way, and often do. But if they're matched with others who think along the same lines, their improvisation looks almost coordinated. Blue shrugs. It's hard to tell ahead of time, but you can really see it when you watch people battle together often enough. Igaram nods without following up with any more questions. He wonders if she was genuinely curious about what he meant, or just checking to see if his experience and perception of it matched hers. Is that also when you started setting different rules for both sides? Or did that come after? Mr. Iha asks, getting things back on track. After, Blue says. At first we tried keeping things as even as possible on both sides, but they just felt like 6-on-6 battles where the objective didn't really matter until most of the trainers were out of Pokemon anyway. Glenn also brought up the idea of making the battles more reflective of actual incidents by changing how much coordination the team representing the wild Pokemon in the scenario are allowed, which we tried and found really fun. Fun? Mrs. Khatri interrupts, brow raised. Was that an important metric in your design philosophy? Blue frowns for just a moment before clearing his expression. He was waiting for her to speak out. He's more frustrated with himself for his choice of words. I didn't mean it was just fun. It added another layer to the planning and fighting that we weren't used to. Helped us grow stronger. Restrictions often force people to become creative, Sabra asserts with a nod. But wouldn't this also restrict the ability of both teams to work together? Even swapping positions, only one team would ever get the full benefit of the exercise. Blue shrugs. Even if we assume only one side is having some interesting restriction, which I don't think was true in today's scenario, for example, in the end it's a trade-off. We decided that making the scenarios more realistic is way more valuable than just deciding who the best combination of 6 trainers are. It's not like we're preparing to hunt teams of renegades or something. Surge seems to have something to say to that, but restrains himself as Mr. Iha says, Let's speak more about today's match. What do you think could have improved it? Blue's mind races as he tries one last time to find something. He expected a question like this, and spent most of the trip here trying to figure out what he could say. The problem is he can't think of anything. Unlike the first few engagements, the setup seems to reflect a realistic incident, or part of one. The teams, and more importantly the rules applied to both, seemed balanced enough that either side could reasonably have won, though it would take a few more tests to make sure. Damn it. Why couldn't Surge have done this after one of the other matches, when he could have listed specific mistakes and described how he planned to correct them? Instead, he's going to end up sounding overconfident. But no, there's also a value in trusting his own assessment and standing firmly behind it. Surge may have spotted things he would change out of preference, or different priorities than what Blue has been considering. The only thing to do is show his trust in the work they've done. I think it was solid, Blue says at last. More features could be added, though we'll run it another time or two to make sure of what we've got so far. But at its core, I know this sounds self-serving, but I would respect anyone who was able to win a badge from this kind of match, if it were held against Leader Surge and his own team of trainers. Sabra smiles as Surge raises a brow, but Mr. Iha is frowning. I believe we've reached a point of disagreement. Each individual, you say, including trainers who just fought what was essentially a normal trainer battle. Perhaps the defenders would deserve a badge, as they had to make do with half as many Pokemon. But if the offense won, you would award a badge to someone that had such an advantage? I would, Blue says, trying to keep his tone mild despite the anger stirring in his chest. Because clearly it wasn't as big an advantage as you're implying. Or do you think my trainers were just that incompetent? Whoops, that last word was a bit transparent. He keeps his gaze on Mr. Iha as he sees Surge steeple his hands under his chin in his periphery. The league official's lips thin, and Blue tries to think of a politically safe response if he actually says yes. Sabra saves him by speaking up. We haven't decided yet how we might run these scenarios. We may always take the role of the attackers, for example. And remember that even the attackers in this battle had opponents that were able to swap Pokemon while they were not, until the end. My point was not that they are not capable, Mr. Iha says, which is probably the closest thing to an apology that Blue will get. The true issue is whether that capability is demonstrated through the matches. As you say, the attackers were unable to change their Pokemon, but that is exactly the sort of skill that is crucial for a trainer. Yeah, it is, Blue concedes. But there are 7 other badges that trainers can use to demonstrate that particular skill in. This was one potential scenario for one badge. I don't think the league is lowering its bar by having it focus on other skills. One badge for now, Mrs. Khatri says, turning everyone's attention to her. But our job entails taking the wider view and the longer one. If other gyms decide to implement similar systems, perhaps that would not be so bad. But say the second or third such breaks from tradition are each a little broader than this one, and the 4th gym decides to hand badges out by, say, acts of extreme service to the community, or non-battle training skill, or the fulfillment of the leader's personally prized virtue. Commendable as those things may be, they are not what the Pokemon Leagues are designed for. Indigo is one of the most well-respected in the world, our champions recognized across the globe for their battle skills. Disagreements about what makes someone worthy of a badge can very well make it harder to avoid conflict between gyms, or between gyms and the league, or between our league and foreign ones. The room is quiet for a moment. This was not one of the ideas Blue had prepared for. At worst, he imagined facing arguments for tradition for its own sake, and the problem is he actually agrees with her to an extent. He doesn't want badges to become seen as meaningless, and he particularly doesn't want the Indigo League to lose prestige, especially considering he plans to be leading it as soon as he can. The silence builds and Blue realizes he has to say something. And if he can't rely on preparation, he has to at least speak from his heart. I wish I could dismiss your concerns, but unfortunately I think you're right to have them. My only response is that I trust our region, from the trainers to the leaders to the league officials such as yourselves, to ensure that doesn't happen. And in the meantime, we should act to improve where and when we can, even if it requires fundamental change. I think these scenarios make my peers and myself better trainers, and I think this gym will better serve its trainers and its city by officially adopting them. He sees Mr. Iha about to speak and predicts the response. For awarding gym badges in particular, training people with them is good, but it's not enough. As long as the Mastery Challenge is a one-on-one standard trainer match, that's what most who come here will focus on. Well said, Serge puts in, speaking for the first time since the beginning. He turns to the 2 league officials. I understand your concerns and appreciate your time in discussing this with us. You can rest assured that I do not intend to have my gym's prestige deteriorate by any means. Mr. Iha looks like he wants to say something to that, then checks his watch. Mrs. Khatri gets to her feet and bows her head, and after a moment he does the same, followed by the rest of them. Thank you for the discussion, everyone. Leader, please keep us abreast of any decisions you make on this. I will. Serge waits until they leave, then turns to Blue as he sits back down, prompting the others to take their seats again too. Well, that didn't go so badly. Blue smiles, both in relief and at the idea of Serge worrying about that too. Seems more true now that you said it than a moment ago. Were you worried I wouldn't be able to explain things? Or that they would be more resistant? Some of both, Sabra says, and you kept your temper better than I expected. Igaram nods. He blinks. Was that something you were worried about? A little. Heard you could be hot-headed when someone gave you cause to be. He catches himself as he notices the trap and the way he feels heat moving through him again. Where did she hear that? Not from his trainers, surely. Maybe from people who were at the hospital that day. The anger rises further, mixed with a confusing and painful mess of emotions, and he takes a moment to push them down. It doesn't have to have been the hospital. Maybe they heard about what happened with the Rangers leading the Absol hunt, or one of a dozen other times he got pissed at someone in public. Probably fair, he admits, though part of him, a big, four-legged, fire-breathing part, continues to insist otherwise. I'm working on it. Evidently, Serge says, fingers tapping the table as he studies Blue. If we are to try this experiment, and you end up getting your badge, would you leave the gym to pursue your journey? Blue is quiet a moment, not because he needs the time to consider his response. It's one of the questions he predicted he would be asked weeks ago, and has already searched both his feelings on the issue, and what he imagines the leader would want to hear most, so he could give a response that best satisfies both. He hesitates before answering, however, because he knows that responding too quickly would make his answer seem less credible and thought out. Or maybe it would make it seem more earnest and true. But if Serge is worried about him outright lying, then he has bigger concerns. I would make sure all my people get theirs too, Blue says. Not just those that will be continuing their journey with me, but also the ones that I've trained with, whether they want to stay or not, and whether the format lets us earn them 6 at a time, or by groups of 4, or 3, or whatever. And then, once everyone has made it through, yes, I would continue my ambition of challenging the rest of the league. I see. Regrettable, but I understand. Just as I hope you'll understand, then, when I say that you won't be looped into our discussions about the scenarios we construct. Blue blinks. What do you... Why not? It's a stupid question, but Serge is already answering. You'll be the first opponent, of course. You and however many others are involved in the scenario. We'll continue discussing the ones you engage in and how you construct them, but the ones we make will have to be kept close to the vest to avoid any unfair advantage. And afterward, Blue would be gone. He wouldn't ever actually help construct the scenarios with the gym, wouldn't actually be part of the process of turning it into an official league activity. Oh, people will remember that it was his idea, of course, and will remember that he was practicing it with his friends for a while. But it's not the same. For all they might know, the gym would have been working on it from the start, and his own practice was just to prepare. The anger comes then, but he's too pragmatic for it to do much but make him look down, hands clenching his knees. I'm sorry. I know. No, Blue says. I get it. It's my choice to leave after. I can change my mind if I really want to. He sighs, looks up. One last question of my own? The media will be waiting outside. What can I tell them? Leader Serge spreads his hands. Whatever you want, as long as it's true. The goal is not to take your due credit from you. Blue nods, then rises to his feet and briefly bows. Thank you, leader. He nods to the second and third, who nod back. Thank you, Mr. Oak. Dismissed. By the end of the second-month anniversary of the Zapdos attack, Vermilion City has largely recovered. Visually, at least. All the broken windows have been replaced, and most of the stores are unshuttered and back in business. The main exception are the dozen cranes that still dot the cityscape where the burnt buildings are being repaired. His gaze stays on them as he mounts Daisy's Swellow, and they take off, circling the city once to gain altitude, and then flying due west. It's been over a week since the meeting, and things have continued more or less as usual, with a couple exceptions. First, he and Glenn go to speak with Sabra and Igaram after each match, sometimes with Serge present. And second, Blue spent more time at the gym on Sabra's orders, dropping his visits with Gramps in order to fulfill his duties in training with and teaching more than just the group he's been doing scenarios with. Now that he knows his time at Vermilion is starting to come to a close, his time at the gym and among the city streets make him realize how much he's going to miss it all. But as the city falls away behind them, land swiftly replaced by water, Blue feels something loosen in him too. Vermilion holds bad memories as well as good, memories with weight, and his time at the gym reminded him of those too. Aiko is part of it all, in the gym's central yard, and its training rooms, and its dining hall, memories of her hidden in every nook and cranny, ready to pop out without warning. And in those moments he always felt renewed grief and anger at Red, not just for his decision, but for running away afterward. Not that Blue is one to talk. He can recognize that he's avoided facing them himself, now that he's doing so again little by little, thanks to Sabra. He wonders if she noticed, and occasionally thought of asking her, but he's still not sure if he's ready for whatever conversation that might lead to. For now, he's just focused on getting through it all a day at a time, though he has been reaching out to Leaf more often. Whatever painful memories he's facing, he knows that living where she is must be at least as bad. Awfully quiet back there, bro. Daisy's voice is clear in his earpiece despite the wind, and he feels her hand find his where it clutches the saddle handle for a brief squeeze. Everything okay? Yeah. Blue shakes himself out of his melancholy as best he can. Sorry, just thinking about today's scenario. What's new and exciting with you? How's my Steelix? It was a tough choice, but he didn't feel right keeping it once he learned that Daisy lost 2 Pokemon holding it off before he got there. My Steelix, thanks again by the way, is doing great. And I don't know how exciting it is for others, but I've got Moonlight able to do 5 consistent metronomes now, none too impressive. Decided to try teaching a Snorlax to swim. Stop laughing. Do you have any idea how much air they can hold? What else? Broke up with my girlfriend. Found a no. What? Blue flicks her leg. I didn't know you were dating anyone. Who was she? You don't know her, and she is fine, she's not dead, Daisy teases, then goes silent. Blue takes a breath, and by the time he lets it out, his sister's hand is back on his. Sorry. It's fine, he says, not wanting to talk about it. So you found another already? Who is she? A coordinator from Kalos. She's only in town for a few weeks, but she bought a couple Abra while here, so visiting will be easy. What about you? Drawing any puppy love eyes from all those trainers you're working with? Blue thinks of Elaine's kiss, and after a moment just says, nah. Daisy sighs. I'm sorry. Again. I'm not doing it on purpose, I swear. I'm just an idiot. Huh? Blue realizes he was quiet for too long, and she must have thought she upset him. He replays what she said and can't find any reference to Aiko. Why? I didn't remind you of Red? Oh, the Abra thing. No, he says, voice flat. Ah, okay. She doesn't believe him. Blue considers telling her he was too busy thinking of Elaine to think of Red, then rejects that idea and just pokes her in the ribs through her thick jacket. Seriously. I believe you. Blue rolls his eyes and lets it go, glad she's not nudging him to make up with Red again, at least. He spends the next few minutes looking out over the ocean as the setting sun sends ripples of light across its waves. The rocking from her Swellow's wing movements make it hard to take pictures, unless he times it with a glide. But he didn't bring a wrist strap and doesn't want to risk dropping his phone. Though come to think of it, her Pokemon could probably catch it if he does. He's just about to ask what she thinks when Daisy speaks first. Blue, can you promise me something? Depends what it is, he says, already wary. Just let him have tonight? Don't bring up what he did. I get it, I do, but... You don't get it, he says, anger bursting up in a scalding wave. It wasn't you he came for. She's quiet for a minute, then says, You can be a real idiot too sometimes, you know that? You think he never did that for me? It's different. It wasn't killing him then. The words churn acid in his stomach. The very act of saying them out loud makes them more real. And it wouldn't be killing him now if he hadn't then. You're just intent on protecting him, and I get why. But all he was doing was the same thing you asked Red to. Blue reaches up and switches off his earpiece, face a mask as he presses his forehead against her back, none too gently, and closes his eyes. He's already tried explaining to her the difference between what Gramps did and what Red didn't do. And she wasn't there after, didn't hear the way he was justifying it. Blue's not in the mood to hash over it all again. Daisy pats his hand, then squeezes it, then pinches it. He pinches back, hard, and she leaves him alone after that. He told his gym leadership that he was working on his anger, and that includes against annoying older siblings. All things considered, he thinks he's handling things rather well. A couple hours later, they're home, which is already full of neighbors, friends, and researchers from the lab, all happy to toast to the professor's health. The place feels so strange, after so long away, and not just because it's decorated for the celebration and crowded. Blue plays the part of the cheerful grandson, but in truth he feels a fraud. All these people so happy to see Gramps healthy again would look at Blue with considerably less friendliness if he hadn't made it through the storm. His grandfather does seem his old self at least, holding court with his stories, arguing in high spirits with Uncle Samson, laughing uproariously at the pictures his co-workers took depicting how they taped pictures of his face onto a series of mannequins and set them up around the office, each with various speech bubbles relaying his most common phrases or admonishments. There are 2 big cakes, one with a standard welcome back, written over it with all his employees' signatures in icing over the surface, and a second that gets delivered in the middle of the party. Its surface is covered in a custom depiction of the Professor, Blue, and Daisy, standing side by side with two Steelix between them. This is only discernible from context, as the art isn't particularly good, but that's understandable considering it's done in frosting and was made by two of the children that had been evacuated from the arena that night. Daisy reads the letter that comes with it aloud, which makes numerous people teary-eyed, and results in applause that cause the professor to wipe at his eyes and excuse himself briefly. Blue has to struggle to accept his portion of the praise with a smile, all the while thinking of Aiko, and how few people will ever know how she did something far braver than him, and didn't survive for her own cake or applause. Once that's over, Blue takes the opportunity to locate his grandfather's doctor, who has had a few drinks by this point, and pull him aside to ask him straight how bad it would be if Gramps is exposed to pressure again. The older man gives a despairing sort of shrug, as if knowing that they aren't speaking about an unlikely hypothetical. Your grandfather is rather unique in the combination of the age he's reached and the amount of pressure exposure he's had. It's hard to tell how much of the harm is caused from the initial exposure opposed to the duration, but on the optimistic side, another hour could take 3 months to recover from. On the not-so-optimistic side, he could be down for a year. Seeing Blue's horrified expression, the doctor nods. On top of that, your sister said he passed out within 40 minutes of first feeling the pressure. The medication is getting less effective, and I wouldn't be surprised if it lasts half as long next time. Blue eventually finds himself on a couch in the corner of the living room, staring into his soda as the conversation ebbs and flows around him, lost in thoughts of the future. Despite what Daisy said, once everyone leaves, he's going to need to talk to Gramps about what happened again. Every time he visited over the past 2 months, watching the professor steadily recover his health, it had been to talk about other things, the older man firmly guiding conversations away from anything serious unless they were related to Blue's goals. Now they would have to finish the talk they had that first morning after the storm. Daisy kicks his foot as she walks by, and he looks up to see her giving him a curious look. He shakes his head, and she frowns but doesn't pry. Raymond is here, you know. Think he wanted to talk to you at some point. Blue smiles despite his mood. Ray is one of the 2 trainers who set off with Daisy from Pallet Town during her own journey. The other, Clara, died a few years ago, and the 2 have remained close, which means he used to come by often to visit both his old professor and Daisy. He spent a lot of time coaching Blue's pokeball throwing, though those memories are a bit ruined by Red being there too. It's the first time since his own journey that they've spoken, and Blue actually enjoys himself for a while as he talks about his adventures. He should have suspected what was coming, and when Ray starts talking about Clara and how hard it was for them to lose her, Blue feels a sudden sense of betrayal that he has to force down for long enough to make the appropriate social responses, including promising to call Ray if he ever wants someone to talk to about Aiko. Afterward, he excuses himself to lie in his room for a while, feeling the anger at Daisy pace around in his chest and send ripples of heat through him until he realizes she may not have pushed Raymond to say all that, and it finally fades to a dull and painful ache. Guests start to trickle out after midnight, the remaining ones helping clean up as the party begins to wind down. Blue is shooed away from helping wash dishes by one of his neighbors, and wanders the house looking for something useful to do, only to fail utterly and end up listlessly picking up half-full plastic cups and dirty plates from all sorts of unlikely places around the house. When the last guest has finally left, Blue heads to his grandfather's office, expecting him to already be catching up on the work he wasn't able to do from the hospital. Instead, he sounds like he's speaking with someone, and when Blue hears who it is, a mix of emotions he can't quite place run through him. Haas would have just made things awkward, Red says, and it takes a moment to recognize the voice is coming from his grandfather's computer, rather than Red having arrived at some point while Blue was busy. Nonsense. You're always welcome here. This thing with Blue will pass as soon as you both speak to each other more. Red is silent, and Blue feels a moment of unwanted kinship with his old journeymate. Gramps doesn't understand. As long as neither of them have changed their minds, speaking to each other could only make things worse. Anyway, I should get back to it, Red says. Just wanted to say I'm glad you're feeling better. I appreciate it, and the call. What are you working on now, anyway? I noticed you registering a number of psychic Pokemon lately. Oh yeah, it's a new project by Sabrina. I'm, not supposed to talk about it yet, but I'll share more when I can. It's pretty exciting, actually. Professor Oak tisks. You're not making me less curious, you know. I may just ask around and see what I can learn on my own. Hey, yeah, you should do that. Maybe you'll find out more than me. Gramps chuckles. Good night, Red. Good night, Professor. Blue waits a full minute, both to disguise the fact that he was listening and to let his emotions settle down. Eventually, he knocks on the door. Come in, Gramps says, and Blue enters, aiming straight for one of the comfy chairs that make up the professor's home office. Not tired yet? Nah, could say the same for you, though. Shouldn't you still be getting lots of rest? Just after this email, his grandfather promises, tapping away at his keyboard with his eyes on the screen. Did you hear about the wingsuit prototype using the flying particles? Yeah, Bernard told me about it after dinner. Blue examines his grandfather in the bright office light, the lines on that familiar face, and the hair that seems more salt than pepper every time he sees him. A terrible love seizes his heart and squeezes, and he has to blink rapidly and clear his throat before asking, Enjoy the party? Very much. It was nice to have an excuse to see everyone again. The professor taps a few more times, then clicks, then reaches up and turns off his monitor before standing to tidy up some things. So what do you want to talk about, Blue? He smiles slightly. What? A doting grandson can't just come to spend time with his grandfather? Gramps laughs. All right, fair enough. But if you don't bring up something to talk about soon, I warn you I will, and then you won't be able to get a word in edgewise. Empty threat. You've already nearly talked yourself hoarse tonight. Start yapping away anymore and you'll lose it completely. Nothing a squeeze of potion wouldn't fix. Yuck. Blue takes a breath, then lets it out. Gramps, I know. He closes his eyes. You don't. I'm trying to say something new. Professor Oak stops, then comes to sit in the chair next to him. I'm sorry, Blue. I'm listening. Gramps, I can't do this again. I can't go into another storm, not until I know you feel confident enough in me not to come too. I know it will get in the way of my ambitions, but I need you to know, so you don't come anyway. The professor watches him with a slightly furrowed brow. All right, he says slowly. If that's what you want. I understand, of course, and I'll trust you. But is it what you want, Blue? What about your promise? Blue's eyes widen. What are you talking about? He asks, trying far too late to look puzzled. Did Red tell him? That fucking coward. You don't remember? Gramps asks, seeming genuinely surprised. Remember what? Well, maybe it's better not to tell you then. Gramps, remember what? His grandfather sighs. Right. I suppose it's a bit late for that. He shifts in his seat to more fully face Blue, expression grave but tranquil. How much do you remember of that time after your parents died? Blue shrugs, gaze down. Bits and pieces. Sadness. How unfair it all was. Feeling lost. Being angry. A lot of that. I suppose that makes sense, though you showed very little of it. Very little of anything, in fact, except the anger. After your parents died, you were inconsolable isn't the right word. It wasn't like Red after Tom was killed. You kept on going about your life as if it was mostly normal. You cried, yes, but mostly you were angry, as you say. Sure, I remember all that. Not that he particularly wants to. And? Professor Oak sighs again, clasping his hands over his knee and looking suddenly older as he stares into his lap. It was maybe a week after it happened. You'd just started therapy and had spent the night at Red's. Tom and Laura were downstairs talking to me after they dropped you off, and Red spent some time with you upstairs while we talked about how you were doing. I remember Laura being worried about you when I expressed my own concerns, mostly because we didn't know why you weren't expressing more sadness. After Red came down and everyone left, it was late, so I thought you were sleeping. I didn't mean to pry, but when I walked by your bedroom toward mine, I heard you talking. I thought you were on the phone with Red or Daisy, but it wasn't a conversation, or at least not that kind. His grandfather's eyes are so sad Blue can barely look at them. You were making a promise to your parents. Blue just stares at him. He can't remember this at all. The earliest he can recall putting the thoughts into words, into saying them out loud, was to Red after his dad died. You don't remember? No, Blue says, blinking. But I was thinking about it then, I know that. And I did make that promise again later. Gramps nods. Well, I knew then that when you got older you would try, that you would throw yourself into the teeth of the world to get as strong as possible, to take them down. When you finally told me about your ambition, I was relieved. I knew you wouldn't try to do it alone, to hide it, and pretend to just be after a normal championship. That's what I was most afraid of. Well, I was still a little afraid of it after, if I'm being honest. That if I tried to keep you home longer, to wait until you were older, you would just grab a Pokemon and go. But that night, that was when I stopped responding to incidents that would expose me to pressure. It was already starting to debilitate me, and I knew I had to preserve as much time with it as I could for Daisy. And then for you. The words hit his chest like stones. Blue reaches out and takes his grandfather's hand, jaw working as he breathes in and out. I used to think you were a coward, he whispers, not looking at his grandfather. When I was younger, I thought you should go after them, capture them, kill them. He looks up, hand squeezing. I didn't think that for long. I understood after Moltres hit Viridian. His grandfather smiles and raises Blue's hand for a kiss, then clasps both hands around his. I told you all this just to make sure you understand. There's nothing you did that made me choose what I did rashly. I was prepared for this for years. If you decide to give up that promise, which I know must mean a lot to you, I don't regret being the cause of that exactly. You are too young, particularly if you want to be more than a cog in the machine. But I want to make sure you're doing it for reasons you can respect yourself for, and not out of some form of coercion that concern for me has forced onto you. Blue swallows the lump in his throat, trying to think through the confusion he feels. I don't know what to think, Gramps. Part of me knows it was a childish commitment, totally naive about what exactly it would mean. Not just in the moment, but for my other promise, my real goal of taking them down. I know I shouldn't hold myself to something just because I said it when I was younger, no matter how much I meant it. Red has said a lot on that topic. Blue can almost hear his voice before dismissing the apparition with a rush of words. I don't know how I'll actually act the next time I have an opportunity to face them. Maybe I'll be able to resist, and maybe not. But whatever I choose, I don't think I'll do it just because of the promise. Gramps watches him a moment, then slowly nods. I understand. And I said I would trust you, but to be clear, you're not just saying this because you want to keep me from assuming you're there next time and going. I thought about it, Blue says, and shakes his head. But no, this is me. He's not sure if that would actually be true, if Gramps hadn't told him that story about himself, hadn't helped him realize just how far back the, objectively, ridiculous promise went. It's one thing to commit himself to what others think is impossible, and he's still sure that capturing or killing the Stormbringers is the most important thing, the only really important thing, he can do. But he won't live to do it if he rolls the dice every time they hit a town or city meanwhile. Well then. His grandfather squeezes his hand again, long and hard. I know I say this a lot, but I'm very proud of you, Blue. I always have been. And decisions like this are why. Blue nods, bites his lip. I think they're going to take the scenarios from me. Gramps raises a brow, and bless him, doesn't miss a beat. Don't they have to, eventually? Yeah, but once they do, it'll be out of my hands. It's mine and Glenn's, and then... I understand. But you have higher heights to climb, and a pain like this will be necessary time and again. It's good practice for when you'll be giving up something quite a bit more dear to you for your true goal. Blue nods, and his thoughts sway back again as his eyes suddenly burn. Do you think they... His words fade with his breath, and he swallows hard as the true deep fear comes boiling out. Mom and Dad, would they be mad at me for breaking my... He barely gets the last word out before his grandfather has pulled him into a tight hug, and he clings to him until all his tears are gone. The next day, as he's on his way back to Vermilion City, Sabra sends him a message. They would no longer discuss his practice scenarios afterward, and the first group badge challenge would be in a week. A follow-up message simply states that the battleground would be within the city.
This has been an AI reading of the Pokemon fanfic, Pokemon: The Origin of Species, written by Daystar Eld. If you enjoy this work, please visit patreon.com/daystareld, where you can support the author. Additionally, if you enjoyed this podcast and wish to help support the creation of others like it, you can visit patreon.com/askwhocastsai, where we are releasing episodes 4 weeks in advance of the regular feed. Thanks for listening.